All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into a really complex geopolitical chessboard. We've got three major players: China, Taiwan, and India. And we're going to look at what happens when their ambitions and their borders, well, when they collide.
So let's just jump right in with the big question, the one that really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. What if China decided to move on Taiwan and India at the same time? I mean, could that even happen? It's a scenario with, frankly, massive global implications.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the stakes here, we first have to ask why. Why is China so focused on these two specific spots on the map? They're totally different situations, but believe me, they are both incredibly important to Beijing's grand strategy.
You see, for Beijing, Taiwan isn't just some island. It's personal. It's a piece of their history. In their eyes, it's a runaway province that split off back in 1949 after the Civil War. And bringing it back, well, that's seen as the final crucial step to erasing what they call the century of humiliation and, really cementing national pride.
But let's be clear, this is about way more than just pride. Taiwan is a strategic jackpot, a total game changer. If China controlled it, they'd suddenly dominate half of the world's shipping routes. They could finally break through what's called the First Island Chain, that's basically a wall of U.S. allies, and get full access to the Pacific. And oh yeah, the biggest prize of all? They'd control TSMC, the company that makes something like 90% of the world's most advanced computer chips. That is a massive deal.
So you've got to be wondering, right? How on earth can a small island like Taiwan possibly stand up to a military giant like China? Well, the answer is, they don't play by the same rules.
First off, just follow the money. Look at this. China's defense budget is around $300 billion. Taiwan's, $20 billion. That's a 15-to-1 difference. With that kind of gap, you just can't win a straight-up conventional fight. It's unwinnable from day one.
And that spending difference, you can see it right here in the raw numbers. China has more of, well, everything. Way more troops, thousands more tanks, a huge navy compared to Taiwan's. The list goes on. So a head-to-head fight? Yeah, that's just not going to happen. It's not a viable option.
So, this is the crucial part. Taiwan has to completely change the game. And that's where this brilliant idea comes in, the Porcupine strategy. Think about it. The goal isn't to win, not in the traditional sense. The goal is to make yourself so spiky, so painful to attack, that the bigger guy just decides, you know what, it's not worth the trouble.
So forget about trying to match China's fancy aircraft carriers or expensive jets. This strategy is all about cheap, mobile, and seriously lethal stuff. We're talking thousands of sea mines to clog up the beaches, anti-ship missiles on the back of trucks that can hide anywhere and pop out to fire, swarms of autonomous drones, even cyber attacks to mess up an invasion before a single boot hits the ground.
Okay, so that's the Porcupine strategy for an island. Makes sense, right? But now let's shift gears and travel thousands of kilometers away, up into the Himalayan mountains. This is where India has its own standoff with China. And the big question becomes, can you take that same spiky philosophy and make it work on land, in some of the toughest terrain on the planet?
See, Taiwan has this big natural moat, the Taiwan Strait. India doesn't have that luxury. Instead, it shares this huge, rugged, 3,500-kilometer border with China. We're talking about the Himalayas here. High altitude, brutal terrain that completely changes the rules of the game. It's a logistical nightmare for any army.
And the tension up there? It's not theoretical. It's very, very real. We saw just how real back in 2020 with the clashes in the Galwan Valley. Now, things have calmed down a bit since then, with some troop disengagement and diplomatic talks. But the core problem, who owns what land, is still totally unresolved. It's like a fragile truce.
So, back to our question. Could India use a Porcupine strategy? You bet. But it would look different. Instead of anti-ship missiles, you'd have mobile anti-tank missiles hiding in the valleys. Instead of sea mines, you'd have heavily fortified mountain passes and networks of high-tech sensors. But the core idea? It's exactly the same. Make any Chinese advance so brutally costly and difficult that it just grinds to a halt.
All right, so we've got two totally different potential conflicts, but with the same powerful rival. So let's put them side by side and really break down what's at stake in each one.
And when you look at it this way, the differences are just wow, they're stark. For Taiwan, a conflict is existential. It's literally about their survival. For India, it's territorial. It's about defending their border. And that changes the global stakes dramatically. A Taiwan conflict could easily spiral into a world war involving the US and its allies. An India-China conflict, while horrible, would probably stay a massive regional war.
But even with all those differences, you can see they have a ton in common. They're both democracies right next door to a massive authoritarian power. They're both important partners for the United States. And both are dealing with China's gray zone tactics. You know, all that stuff that's aggressive but stops just short of actual war. So they're definitely on the same page strategically, even if they don't have a formal alliance.
And that shared struggle brings us to a really dangerous what if. What would actually happen if India threw its weight behind Taiwan and decided to formally take a side in a conflict?
Well, for Beijing, this is the ultimate red line. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, more sensitive to them than Taiwan. They see it as an internal issue, period. Any outside country getting involved, especially a huge regional power like India, would be seen as a massive provocation.
And China's response would probably be, well, everything, all at once. They could immediately crank up the pressure on that Himalayan border, forcing India to fight its own war. They could hit India with huge economic sanctions. We're talking about a $100 billion trade relationship here. They could try to isolate India diplomatically. They might even stir up trouble through proxies like Pakistan. It would get ugly fast.
So, when you look at all those potential costs, the smart money says India's best move is to stick with its long-standing policy of strategic autonomy. And what that really means is keeping the freedom to make its own choices, based on its own interests, without getting dragged into somebody else's fight.
And that really leaves us with the big question for India, doesn't it? It's clear they can learn a lot from Taiwan's spiky defense playbook to make their own borders tougher. But dealing with a rising China is this incredibly delicate dance between being strong enough to deter an attack and being diplomatic enough to avoid one. So, a spiky defense or a strategic patience? Finding that right balance, well, that's the great challenge facing New Delhi today.